Paul, yes. Could you do me a favor and go through the actual legislation that allowed for the starting of each independent agency of the United States federal government? I had emailed the inspector generals of each and every one of them, and I'm sitting on the street drinking instant coffee, and I just ran out of cigarette papers. Now I'm gonna have to walk around and try to get $1.08, and when I have to do that, it really upsets me because I know my rights are being violated, and no one in any independent agency thought they had the obligation to support the Constitution of the United States. Pooch. Now, when you go through the actual employees, yes, they're a little different than senior executive service, or can you be a senior executive in the federal government and work for an agency? Why don't you get me all the commissioners of the bureau? How are you? Ow! Now, I'm going to look at the actual legislation that was passed. Yes. See, quite often when you have a new administration over the last couple hundred years, and you're like, well, let's start an independent agency that does or does not answer to a department. Yes. That does or does not have a cabinet position within the White House. Oh, now I would have thought that they would have put some sort of clause in that legislation that you have to support and defend the Constitution when you know it's being violated. Now, my thought is I'll just sue every fucking employee of every independent agency that has any knowledge of the crime of violating all 10 amendments, and some of them multiple times. Pooch. Then the additional 17 amendments. This right to vote that I talked to you about, that you have as a naturalized citizen of the United States? Yes. Who am I going to vote for when there isn't an oath of office in the United States that's willing to support and defend the Constitution of this great nation? Now you're sitting there in your independent agency office of the United States federal government thinking to yourself, well, I can't get sued. But I'm thinking that to pass actual legislation allowing for the start and funding of any independent agency of the United States, there must have been some sort of requirement about supporting and defending the Constitution. Now we'll just look through, okay? Congress! Now, I have emailed the state legislature this morning about this fraud, the fraud of the signature of the court officers, the fraud on the court, every officer of every court. Yes. And then the fraud of the state. Oh, where the state of Washington doesn't enforce their RCWs. Pooch. They don't enforce the federal legislation, the VAWA. Pooch. They don't enforce the PKPA, the Parental Kidnapping Protection Act, where you cannot give custody of a person's children to another spouse without any due process. And then you don't actually enforce the fraud of the United States, where independent agencies have employees employed that have the knowledge of the fraud of the United States. Pooch! You don't support and defend the Constitution of the nation. Then there are those conventions that are a member of where you sign these treaties because of the authority of the Constitution that gave you the authority to start independent agencies. And then there's that fraud of the corporation yesterday. You know what happened. No, a truck was driving by. No. And there was something in the back of that pickup truck, in the bed of the truck. Yes, a word named block. BLOCK. Yes, yes. When I think about redesigning the brick, because I had documented that as an innovation, yes, he's the one who did stuff. The kiln process necessary to make a block. You wouldn't think they're important, but I'm thinking that most all federal buildings are made out of some sort of cement product. Yes, they are. And then they like to put these bricks around them. Yes. Sometimes they even use brick as the walls of federal buildings. Yes, they do. Now, let's say that I decided to sue you for all the building materials that you get to use whenever remodeling or building a new state, federal, county, tribal government, or city building. Pooch! Now you get to buy all my building materials. See, when I redesigned the brick, I made it out of recycled garbage. It has the same strength as a regular old cement brick, but it's made out of recycled garbage and it weighs half the amount with the same strength. Yes, it does. Could you get me all of the kilns of every masonry product that is sold to all the mason contractors go through the union? I'm wanting to know of all the products that are used in the building of every federal, state, county, city, and tribal government building. How many of them are going to be obligated to build to buy all their building materials from me? Now I'm thinking it's a waste of cement to use actual concrete blocks. So get me all the kilns, mutual materials in the Bellevue, Seattle area. Yes, yes, yes. It takes quite a bit of heat to dry out a concrete block, doesn't it? I looked at the kiln process. I have an HHO gas kiln. Yes, he does. Heated up to about 2,000 degrees. It dries out those concrete blocks without any problem, and it doesn't use propane. It doesn't use natural gas. No, it doesn't. It doesn't use electricity. It uses a special type of kiln that I myself designed that I think you're going to have to purchase. Now, I'm sitting here without any fucking cigarette papers, drinking instant coffee because you don't seem to fucking understand.